Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Facebook Live with the Horticulturists. My name is Candice Hart, the State Master Gardener Specialist, and I'm based here in Bloomington, Illinois, so in Central Illinois. My specialty is any type of flowers, so annuals, perennials, cut flowers. Those are the questions that I love to ask. And I have a couple of other great horticulturists with me here today. Live with the Horticulturists. My name is Candice Hart. Sorry, guys. So do you guys want to introduce yourself, my other horticulturist today?
Hi, my name is Kelly Alsop. I'm also based in Bloomington. I'm a horticulture educator for University of Illinois Extension. I have a specialty in integrated pest management, but I have a passion for pollinators, beneficial insects, and invasive species. I love to garden, clearly. I like to do some raised container gardening, and I like to grow some vegetables for my family and myself.
And I'm Ryan Pankar, horticulture educator out of Champaign County. My specialty is trees and shrubs. Forestry and arboriculture are my first loves in horticulture, but I also like to focus on native plants. That's another area I enjoy. And like Kelly, I love vegetable production. We grow a huge vegetable garden at my house, so that's another topic I like. But joining us today, we have a special guest. So,
hi guys. I'm Martha Smith, a horticulture educator. I'm located up in the Quad Cities, so I'm in the northwest part of the state. And I also have a passion just for plants, for gardening. I guess my specialty lies in herbaceous, perennials, ornamental grasses, but I'm a collector of all plants. We have several trees and shrubs and dwarf conifers on our property, so it's definitely a collector's garden. Very few vegetables, just a couple of tomato plants and some green beans, though. But thank you for having me today.
Well, and one thing folks might not know about you, Martha, is that you're also an ISA certified arborist.
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Yeah, it's great to have a fellow tree person.
Yeah, I'm a certified arborist. I took my training about 5 years ago up in the Quad Cities. It's a very in-depth training. If anybody is interested, I'd be happy to answer some questions. It was fun. Thanks.
Awesome. Well, I know you have some stuff to tell us about today, Martha, but I want to let everybody know if you have questions to ask today, whether it's something landscape focused or any type of gardening question, you can start adding those into the comment box and we'll address those as we go through today. But I know Martha had some particular stuff we wanted to kind of touch on today. So what do you have, Martha?
Well, I wanted to talk about the Perennial Plant of the Year program. This is put on by the Perennial Plant Association, which I have been a member 25 plus years. I served on their board as central director for 6 years. I know, Candice, you remember we've been to some national meetings together. And what they did, this was back in 1990, perennials were just exploding back then, and they really wanted to put their name behind some of these plants. So they started the Perennial Plant of the Year program. So we've got, going on almost 30 years of perennials, and it's by the membership. The membership has to nominate 2 perennials. They can do 2 per year. And then the board looks at all of them, and we usually take like the top 5 or 6, the ones that have been several people have found it to be a fantastic perennial. And then we have to look at it because we really want them to be able to grow in a variety of climates. We have members all over the world. We're an international organization. So we want something that just grows in several zones, not just in one spot, because that's not going to be applicable to everyone. We want it to have low maintenance. At the time, when it's first introduced as a perennial plant of the year, at that time, low maintenance. We know as horticulturists, things come in over time, new pests, new bugs, but at the time it's low maintenance. We want it to have multiple season interest. So not only a nice spring color, but some flower color, maybe a berry, maybe some fall color. And like I said, we want it to be relatively pest-free and fairly easy to grow. So those are all the parameters that we follow. In 2020, it is Aurelia Sun King, and I'm going to share my screen and we'll talk about it. I hope you're seeing a picture of a garden with Aurelia Sun King in the background.
Yep.
Okay, this is a picture
taken.
Okay, this is a picture that a good friend of mine, Janet Draper, who works at the Smithsonian as a horticulturist, sent me. And Sun King is the large, limey chartreuse plant in the back. So this plant is going to be kind of a standout because of the color. It is going to get tall. For some people have reported 6 feet. In my garden, it's usually about 4 feet. And it has this wonderful chartreusey yellow foliage. So using it as a backdrop plant, in my garden, I have it up against my European beech hedge. So it kind of serves as that background for my other perennials, but it's up against that solid green. So it really, really pops. It's native to Japan, and it was native to the shady areas of Japan. And it was actually discovered by a plantsman in a Japanese garden center that was on the top of a department store. And he just saw it and thought, wow, this plant really has a lot of attributes. The new growth is going to come out that bright, shiny yellow and then switching over to a limey color, sort of. They say shade. I have 2 of them in my landscape. The one that's in the shade never gets more than 2 feet tall. The other one I have that gets probably morning sun until about maybe 2 in the afternoon, much, much bigger and more yellow. They say that when you have this in the shade, it's going to take on more of the chartreuse colors. So if you really want that bright yellow, morning sun seems to work fine for me. And if we have a drought, they recommend watering it because it can get a little crispy. I have not personally had that problem. It gets small, creamy flowers. Let me show you. Let me share another picture with you. Let me show you another one that Janet sent me. I'm hoping you can see that one.
Pretty, yeah.
Yeah,
It's
very pretty.
And I really like this picture because I like how the blue, I think that's a blue salvia in the front. You can contrast this with some pretty cool colors. I have Agastache, the golden jubilee near it, and when it comes up with those purple flowers, it's just stunning to have that combination. It does get a berry. It's not edible to us, but it's very bird friendly. Now I want to go and I'm going to try to get to, that's leucanthemum from several years ago. Let me see if I can.
So Martha, was that last photo kind of the mature size of the plant?
Yes. Okay. It's going to get that large and that wide. So now I've got to, since I'm on my laptop, my mouse is completely different. Let's see.
In that picture, looked like more of a sunny spot.
Yeah. So I just go to Perennial Plant Association. Anybody can go. And it talks about the perennial plant of the year. You can go on, you can find out about it. This just tells you how to select. I've had some people question saying, oh, it's just the industry pushing out plants that they want to push out. No, this is actually voted on by the membership. Actually, Aurelia Sun King has been actually in the running for several years. And finally, we had enough people to support it. I'm trying to get to it. Sorry. Here it is. So here,
Martha, while you're looking, Christy. No, go ahead. Sorry.
No, wait. So here it just talks about Aurelia Sun King. It's going to show you some more pictures. It's going to tell you basically that everything I've said before. It's great in a container. I like here how it's up against some of those darker colors and they're using the blue containers. Hardy from northern Minnesota down to zone 9. So it's pretty darn hardy. These are the umbels, the flowers. Bees, pollinators are definitely attracted to this plant. And it just makes a low light situation really, really pop. It's also another interesting thing, and Kelly might be interested in this. It's also called udo, or Japanese asparagus, mountain asparagus, or Japanese spikenard, and it's actually edible. Shoots of this plant are considered a culinary delicacy in Japan, and they're cultivated in underground tunnels. So it almost sounds like how they do like white asparagus or any of those blanched vegetables. The flavor is supposed to be asparagus-like and slightly lemony. Personally, I've never had it. And the young shoots are harvested, blanched, they're pickled, and the white fleshy root is able to be consumed as you would a parsnip. So I always thought that was interesting. But it's a great plant. It's a wonderful perennial. I also wanted to share with the viewers that you can go and you can look at the past winners. As I said, we've been doing this since 1990. They used to have cultural information. Now it's just a list. But I think as we scroll through here, you can see some plants that have been pretty darn popular. People always ask which one was the first. It was Phlox stolonifera, which is a native. Then we had several years of cultivars. They try to stick with a straight species, not so much a cultivar, that name that's in the single quote, just because they want this readily available to all the growers, to all the garden centers, to all the buying public. But sometimes those plants have patents on them. And then there's a little bit more involved with it. The other thing I should say is the Perennial Plant Association has changed their timeline, and we come out with the Perennial Plant of the Year. We're given more advanced notice because in the past we've had some crop failures. A stillby Sprite, which was 1994, nice little stillby. Shiny, lacy foliage, flowers come out in like a light shell pink. It only gets about 15 inches tall. They had a crop failure and we couldn't get it. So they really now try to get it out to the growers to make sure that we have this plant. We have a purple cone flower. You see we've got black-eyed Susans. Doesn't have to be a native plant. It can be a non-native plant. We have some ornamental grasses. You can see there, Carl Forrester was the Perennial Plant of the Year in 2001. We also had another grass. It was Northwinds. And for those of you that are interested, Northwind was 2014. And it was actually introduced by Northwind Perennial Farms just north of us, right across the border in Wisconsin. So again, it's a great plant for us. The other thing people often ask me is, are these all going to be fantastic plants? Well, as gardeners, we all know what grows in my garden might not do so well in somebody else's garden, or vice versa. So if someone is having trouble, say that they've tried to plant one of these, try another spot. See if it's maybe that location. It could be the soil. You'll see here we have Asclepias tuberosa, which is the butterfly weed. And I get a lot of people telling me that that's difficult to establish. So I just say, try a different spot. And once it gets established, it should come back for you from years and years and years. So, if anybody wants to learn more, you can certainly Google any of these or shoot me an email and I'd be happy to talk about them.
That's awesome, Martha. I planted two of these in my shade garden last year once they announced that this was a perennial of the year, because I hadn't tried it either, and so far it's looking great.
How tall is it getting in the shade?
It's still pretty small. I would say probably less than 2 feet still. So I'm curious to see how big it's going to get in the spots I put it.
Yeah, well, and like I said, if you feel that it's not getting to size, then you might want to give it some morning sun. But like I said, I've had this one in the one spot for I think 7 or 8 years. So people say, is it going to reseed? Is it going to spread? I have not experienced that at all. It is just in the same spot. I haven't divided it. So I'm really hoping that this would be a good addition that people would want to try, especially in the back of the garden, and really work with your color. I think it can be a really fantastic plant.
So, Martha, you mentioned it had been in the running in the past. You guys, do they ever announce like the runners-up or some of the other events?
Well, to the membership, we get a ballot. So we know what the other ones are. So the general public doesn't see that. And, I can say, since I've been doing this for so many years, we've seen several repeats, and, they make it. There's a couple now that people still keep putting in, but it's just, out of our membership, we might get 1,500 nominations. So that's why we really have to look at the top ones. Those seem to be kind of on the growers' minds or the retailers' minds. So, if it just has one vote or nomination, it's probably not going to show up on the ballot.
Well, and you hate to ever nominate something that people would have a hard time getting too. That's probably something
exactly. Exactly. That's why we did Hakanakloa, the golden Hakone grass. And that is kind of tough for growers. So that was another year. It's a fantastic grass. I love it. It can take shade. I guess I have a preference for yellow foliaged plants. I like them. I like how they contrast. And the Hakanakloa golden Hakone grass works beautifully in the shade with hostas and a stillby. It really pops. But again, they had some problems with it. So availability was tough. Now you find it everywhere, and you find other cultivars too. There's one called All Gold. The one that is the perennial of the year has a thin green stripe down the golden foliage. All Gold is just solid yellow, and it's really pretty.
Nice. Yeah, I love that in my shade garden. I love it. Okay, we had now at least one question come in regarding this. Christy asked, is it pet friendly? So when you're talking about Sungold, know anything about pets with it?
You know what? I don't. I've never had that question. And if I was in my office in Rock, I have a fantastic book brought out by a College of Veterinary Science on pets and plants, but I don't have it here. So I can certainly find out for you.
Great. Yeah, we can get back to you on that, Christy.
Since it's edible,
I would think.
Yeah, I would think so too.
But I don't know.
Yeah, you can't say without a doubt.
Yep.
And don't go grazing on any that you have personally grown yourself, because you don't know if there's what fertilizers or chemicals. So I would say wait a year before you start eating it.
Certainly. And Linda had a comment here, and this might start a good conversation. She said she's currently reading one of Doug Tallamy's books. So this non-native Sun King is not of interest to her. And she made a comment about how professionals, she's hoping they'll adopt a new garden ethic that recognizes we have little time left to save insects, birds, animals. I think you touched a little bit on this one with its use for pollinators, but do you want to touch on just a little bit about kind of natives versus non-natives a little bit?
With the Perennial Plant Association, our focus is to promote the perennial industry, be it native or non-native. Because I've had this question before, and looking at the list, you can see Baptisia australis. We've had the butterfly weed. We've had Hamsonia hubrichtii. We have natives on there, but it's really up to the membership. And if they wish to pursue more natives, Well, then we're kind of limiting the promoting overall of the perennial industry. So we don't make a differentiation. Some years it's a native and some years it's not.
Sure. Yeah, and in general, in anyone's garden, they certainly have a choice of if they prefer to go all native or if they prefer to have a mix, or you kind of have to do what works best with your kind of gardening style and what you're trying to promote.
I'm a plant collector. I want everything.
Ryan's Pollinator Pocket program does the mix of natives and other cultivars. As a pollinator person myself, I don't have to have a native as long as that plant is providing pollinator services, then I am happy in my own garden. And for people like Martha, Candice, and Ryan, we still need to explore these non-native plants because sometimes native plants are not for everyone. Sometimes they don't look the way people want them to look. They're not as neat and tidy. So I think there's a lot of research as of late into seeing if these non-native plants contribute to pollinator health. So I personally am not a purist. Ryan, are you a purist?
No, I think there's something to be said for just diversity overall. And whether that's native or non-native, that's kind of what I go for in my landscaping. I would say I'm probably pretty heavy on the natives in most everything. A lot of the stuff that I plant, but I plant non-native things like Martha. I like neat and interesting plants. I like things with purple foliage is something I've tried to collect in recent years here as one of the areas of interest I have. But I think like just a really good diversity of plants really helps to support insect life, support wildlife, other things. And it doesn't always have to be all native, but we do know that, our native plant species do a lot more for a lot of insect species than some of the non-natives. So that's kind of that's my philosophy. I go for a lot of native, but those special things that I want, those special colored plants or whatever it is, I sprinkle those into and just kind of chalk that up to some additional diversity, and even diversity for wildlife, diversity for visually, coarse, fine textured and things. Sometimes you just can't get everything out of all the natives that you want in that landscape design. So I don't see a problem with adding a few non-natives in and kind of dealing with plants you like too. So
it's also interesting because when I ask the question native versus non-native, I always have to remind the person answering the question, we have our non-natives. Yes, we do have our non-natives here. But some of our natives have ended up overseas and are their non-natives. They're saying, we don't want those. So you have to really, and it's that way with insects, with pests. They're saying, oh, we get all these pests from, overseas. Hey, it isn't just a one-way street, okay? So you've got to realize, this is a global world economy that we live in, and what's native to you might be a non-native somewhere else.
But the nice thing about a list like you guys maintain with Perennial of the Year is that you can pretty safely bet that lots of those have been vetted for invasiveness. If you're going to plant a non-native, that's probably a good list to pick a non-native off of. It's anything in the garden center. So,
well, I just noticed in the chat box someone was asking about chameleon plant being an invasive. Yes, it is. I call it the hootenanny plant because I never pronounced that big Latin name. I'm pretty sure that's never going to be a perennial plant up there.
Yeah. Well, and while we're on that, let's go ahead and look at that question as we mentioned it. So yeah, Marianne says she's struggling with an invasive chameleon plant. The garden center mentioned Roundup as an option. She tried that last summer and it came back this year. She asked about Tordon. Any suggestions for removal of an invasive like chameleon plant? How would you approach?
suggestion is don't plant it, but it sounds like she would have inherited it. It's tough. You really have to be tenacious with it. You have to keep up with it. I would recommend any shoots in the spring, as soon as you start seeing it come up, hit it with Roundup. Any other shoots, you might be doing that maybe 3-4 times over maybe a 6-week period, because the intention, that's a very aggressive plant. So in this, everything's wanting to come up in the spring. By hitting it with Roundup, you're just depleting its food reserves, because every time you knock it down, it wants to come back up. It's going to be using up energy it needs to create a better plant. Then there's always digging it out if you're not into the chemicals, or maybe it's in a spot very close to some desirables. But you've really got to be on it. I have one. It's blue plumbago. It's ceratostigma. I love it. Just because it has the blue flowers, it has a gorgeous fall color, but it spreads. And I know that. So when it reaches out of the bounds where I want it, I will go in and I usually will take a flat edge shovel and slice it. So I'm keeping the center part of the plant, and then I treat the outer parts. And that kills those off, but it's no longer connected to the center of the plant, so the chemical can't move in. Do that to contain it.
Yeah, that's a great strategy. I've never thought of that. You sever the roots and you can kill part of it, not the other part. That's really cool.
Hey, I don't have these gray hairs for nothing.
The only comment I'd have on that is like the mention of Tordon usually kind of, and that's a trade name for the chemical picloram is the chemical for that. And I personally have experience with that killing a lot of non-target things. I've had a number of reports over the years and different projects. There's been a lot of non-target killing of other plants. So it's one that works really well at killing things, but in the soil a little bit. So you just have to be really careful with that. It's one that I don't recommend, but I can't deny the fact that, gosh, it really is effective at killing things. So just be careful.
Isn't that where you would cut into it, usually like a woody plant, and cut into it and paint it on or spray it on? So it's more of a very directed application versus a blanket spray. And is it, though, if I'm thinking correctly, does it move into the roots, into the soil?
It does, but it's also pretty mobile in the soil and moves around and can persist for a while. And I guess the worst example I've had of my own personal experience was a pond levee that I was trying to kill box elder on, because you don't really woody vegetation on a pond levee. Those roots can poke holes in your levee and cause problems. It was just a lot of little tiny stems of box elder all over the place. And it was a couple of years before grass would grow in a few spots because I was sloppy in application. And that's all I can. I felt like I was pretty careful. I was trying to get a little cut stump, but there's just so many tiny little pencil-sized cut stumps I was trying to treat that that chemical escaped. So lesson learned.
I've used it on woody invasives like honeysuckle and some other woody plants. And personally, I've never used it in a perennial or a flower garden.
And Martha, Chris Evans was on our last show, and he taught us that using a product like Tordon on honeysuckle, it was best to do it in the fall versus spring, because it's trying to move all of its resources down. So that was something new I learned about managing invasive honeysuckle.
Well, that's interesting, because many years ago, ground ivy. People are always wanting to get rid of ground ivy. I'm to the point where I fight it, just join it.
Me too.
Great ground cover. It's green. I believe I was at the Chicago Botanic Gardens, and where they have their beds that are landlocked, they got sidewalks around them. Just growing it as a ground cover was working perfectly, because it chokes out everything. But my point is, best time to control it is in the fall. when you get out and you spray it with your broadleaf herbicide, because all the energies are going to the root, which is where you want to kill that. You want to get it all the way to the ground. So yeah, that's very true.
Yeah, and conversely, in the springtime, trying to treat a cut stump of bush honeysuckle, I've seen acres of honeysuckle control fail to be effective at all because that plant's pumping so much energy up out of its roots at that time. It just, the herbicide doesn't go down. And so, I always kind of tell folks, like, if possible, focus your control efforts in the fall. But heck, if you're cutting it down today and it's springtime and today you have to cut it down, I'd rather them get it out and, treat sprouts later.
Well, that's why with the herbaceous stuff, I prefer the spring because I can see where it's coming up and I can see it. And that's why you have to be consistent because yes, everything's coming up. But if you hit it enough times, you're going to deplete the food reserves. So that's what I recommend for the herbaceous.
Yeah. Well, and some things you can't let get out of control. I mean, let the chameleon plant go crazy all through the growing season and then try and control it in the fall because
it's everywhere. Well, and also ribbon grass. That's the other one I always get. It's beautiful. People say, oh, it's so nice with the green and white foliage. And I'm saying, just wait. I have a lot of that green and white foliage.
In a landlocked area, again, maybe it would be lovely, but nowhere.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we've had some questions coming in, so let me scroll back up here. Linda asked earlier, a suggestion, please, for a native for dry shade. What would you say? I'm assuming probably a perennial. Any native perennials for dry shade? What do you think?
So I guess we're talking herbaceous stuff, or I guess we didn't say.
She didn't specify, but I would say let's focus on maybe herbaceous.
There's some of the ephemeral spring wildflowers I like that are handle shade really well and work in cultivation. You can't just get any spring wildflower, but the cultivation I've really come to love on the property we live on now is bluebells and wild geranium, and they kind of make this nice little bloom in the springtime. Now, by this point of the year, you don't have much left. So I don't know, anybody have something that would be longer lived than that? That's kind of start of the year.
Well, I was looking at the Perennial Plant of the Year list, and we do have Amsonia hubrichtii, sometimes called blue sunflower. I've had that in the same spot for years, and it's shade and it's dry because it's way out in the far corner where my hoses don't reach. And it's the finer leafed Amsonia, and it has a phenomenal fall color, just apricot, oranges, golds. So just off the top of my head, I'm trying to think what I have over in that garden because it's so dry. I have some Carl Forester, because Carl Forester is really a cool season grass. So it emerges in the spring, it blooms usually in June, and then in the heat of the summer, it goes dormant. It doesn't need anything because it's not actively growing. And the flower stalks bleach out, you get that nice wheat color, and then it's going to start to regrow in the fall. That's why you see it used so much in commercial settings, because in the middle of the summer when it's 100 degrees out, it doesn't need anything. So Carl Forester, the Amsonia. Yeah, I'd have to think a little more what I have over there.
Epimedium would be good for dry shade.
And I also Calamagrostis, I'm not sure if that's native.
Yeah, probably not, but it would be a lovely addition. Yeah. And I was going to say Columbine maybe, but that's also kind of short, a little bit of a shorter season too, but.
Epimediums, are they native? I'd have to look that one up. I'm not that well versed. They do well in dry shade, Kelly, but you have to water them the first year for establishment. And I've learned that the hard way for many, many years. But once you get them established that first year, you can just pretty much let them be.
Yeah, I have noticed that they're slow to become established.
Beautiful once they do, though.
Yes, beautiful plant.
Yeah, Kelly and I visited Missouri Botanic Garden last year, and what was that garden called, Kelly? Do you remember that? It was like Stumpifery Garden?
Stumpery.
Stumpery. Oh my gosh, it was such a cool, they had just dried up stumps in there, and it was all a shade garden, and the epimedium just looked amazing in there. I'm like, I went home and planted some because I loved it so much.
If you just want a little bit of trivia, Prince Charles has a phenomenal stumpery. It's amazing. Okay. It's amazing because, he's the future king of England. He can get as many stumps as he wants. They've been unearthed, and they're just their own art form in the like an upside down. Yeah. It's just amazing. It's amazing.
I have been on the lookout in my neighborhood for a tree with a stump on it. So
you got to dig it up.
I know, because I want the root part too.
Yeah. Here along the Mississippi, I live about 15 miles away from the Mississippi. There's people that go out and collect the stumps from the river, then bring them home, treat them, really get them cleaned up, and they're works of art.
Well, you talk about something heavy though, stumps.
Yeah.
Any soil attached? Oh gosh, that'd be heavy.
That's why you have to be the future king of England and have people do it for you.
Okay, let me see what else we've had coming in here. We had another perennial one. Amy asked, a stillby always seems to bloom once and is a one and done plant. Are there any that provide continuous blooms? Got suggestions there?
Yeah, as far as I know, there's lots of stillbys. I'm trying to think. The chinensis is the low-growing one. She might get a longer bloom period from that, but usually they are one and done. There are a lot of perennials that, well, let me explain it. When you think about the stillby flower stalk, as it comes up, there's no side buds on it. So with other plants that we would cut out the blossom when it's done, there's usually buds below it that will pop, and that's where you can get a second set of blooms. Usually not as fantastic as the first. So things such as naked flowerscapes with no buds would be coral bells. You can't do that with coral bells. Hosta flowers, that with hosta flowers. Daylilies, you can't expect that daylily flower stalk in half and expect more. There are those that are one and done. There's the book that this person might be interested in is The Well-Tended Perennial Garden by Aust, A-U-S-T. That's what she did her research at Ohio State on. She worked under Stephen Still, who founded the Perennial Plant Association. For her master's project, she researched perennial maintenance. And it's a phenomenal book because it tells you which ones to cut back, when to cut back, to expect more bloom, which ones you can't. And a lot of times that's what I refer to. In fact, I have the latest one. Let me get it. I do have that book at home. Yeah.
Martha, that's one of my favorite books too. I love her lists at the end.
I love that's one of my favorite.
I wonder if she has native plants. I'll look at it.
Like she has a list of you. This is a list of perennials you divide every 4 years. This is a list of perennials you divide every 6 years. This is dry shade, deer tolerant. It's a wonderful book.
This is the completely revised and expanded. This just came out last year. It's Timber Press, and it's still only in hardback because it's so popular. I have found it in paperback, and to hear her speak. I've been to her garden. It's just amazing because she actually doesn't just talk the talk, she walks the walk.
Cool. That's actually one of my favorite things about the Perennial Plant conference is the tours. You get to visit really cool gardens at those conferences.
Yeah, and it's canceled this year.
I know. Virtual this year, right?
Yeah, but oh well.
Next year, hopefully.
Next year.
Okay, I'm going to scroll back up here. We've got some other questions. Bruce mentioned earlier, Ryan and Martha are arborists. Could you talk about what's happening to a lot of maples right now? He said many have been showing disease and defoliating over the last month, at least in northern Illinois where he's at, and he's had a lot of questions about maples lately. So have you guys noticed anything happening on maples this season?
You know, I've wound up with a few questions from north of here. You know, I'm in Champaign, so I'm a zone south of the, kind of Chicago area, but I've got a few questions that have came my way. A couple of the things that I have seen were actually some frost damage.
Yeah.
And buds were expanding and leaves were coming out that happened. Can do crazy things as buds are waking up and coming out. Frost can kill them. It can deform leaves. It can do some of that kind of damage. And so that was some of the early reports of specific kind of maple problems that I saw north of here.
We saw that a lot on ginkgos. I got calls getting frosted out. The other possibility besides frost damage, anthracnose, depending on how much wet weather they had, and it's a fungal disease. It causes, just defoliation. It causes the leaves to look bad. That could be, especially if they were having a wet season. Now, there's also the leaf hopper, and I don't know if they're even out yet. Kelly, you might know better than I, but the leaf hoppers that feed on the new growth with their piercing, sucking mouth part actually insert a toxin. And there's some great pictures out there where people suspect it's herbicide damage when in fact it's leaf hopper and it's on that new growth. I just haven't had any reports that they're out yet.
Yeah, but we know this is bad this year. If you guys have seen it on sycamores, I mean, there's sycamores in my neighborhood that aren't leafed out.
They look sick.
And last year was bad too. We've had a similar spring both years, pretty wet. And last year, I mean, I saw it on oaks and maples. And, if you look at the species that anthracnose can infect, it's a long list. So say if the weather conditions are good for sycamore, there's going to be some other species that haven't.
Here in Bloomington, I've had tons of questions on anthracnose, and then it could potentially be maple leaf spot also, which really it's just an aesthetic damage. There's nothing you can really do to control it at this point. You can do preventative fungicides, but who's going to do that? One of the things that I'm telling my clients here is, just take care of the tree this year because it's already been through somewhat of a stressful event. It's going to lose some leaves. It's going to leaf back out. Maybe, we don't usually fertilize trees in Illinois, but maybe do a fertilizer treatment this year, and definitely don't let that tree go through drought. Give it some supplemental watering. So, if you have, all over Bloomington, Candice can to attest to this, there's anthracnose on almost every maple. And if you're worried about the tree, then, think about taking care of it throughout the year. I also saw, like Martha, I saw the late frost damage on ginkgos and oaks. So those must have been leafing out right when we got that. What was that? The first week of May, where we got that last bit of.
Yeah, and I have
a lot of people are. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying I have some ginkgos where the total top went, and then I've had to do a little bit of a cutback because it actually those terminal buds actually were killed out. So I've had to. And so, it looks kind of weird this year, but
Well, and I think another thing to keep in mind that I was trying kind of remind folks is that, trees are regularly defoliated and they live through that and bounce back. So if you have a healthy tree last year that completely defoliated, say your ginkgo had every leaf killed, it has the energy reserve to leaf back out, and it's probably going to do fine. I think Kelly's advice is wonderful of, hey, it's stressed already. Give it a little extra watering. Maybe it's the year you remulch it and mulch a little wider, but just some of those things. And there's not a maple condition that we know of that like you have to rush out and get a cure for today. So anyway.
Good advice. And speaking of defoliation, we've got an insect question for you, Kelly. Sue asked earlier, she said her viburnum shrubs are being defoliated by a small caterpillar in May. Now she doesn't see them. She lives in Will County. Will her shrub border recover? Is there any insect bird friendly remedy? So I imagine we're probably talking about viburnum leaf beetle.
And I have to say that I knew exactly what she was talking about. Considering I don't personally deal with that in Bloomington, Martha may.
I have a beautiful arrowwood viburnum hedge in the backyard, and I've never seen it. It seems to be up in the Chicago area.
And if I remember right, I feel like we have a home yard and garden pest newsletter article about it that I bet we could find and share, because I think there are some recommendations put out. But yeah, I haven't had it in Central Illinois.
I see, I usually really learn and write about the stuff that's happening in my area. And since it's not here, I haven't seen it here. I have seen it in, I think we saw it at Morton Arboretum. Do you guys remember that?
Yeah, I think we did.
I don't remember that.
Viburnum leaf.
Or at least the image from it.
Yeah. So I'm sorry about much, but yeah, we can share that home yard and garden pest newsletter.
Yeah, see if we can find that. That's a great question. Okay, let me see what else we have here. A question from Star. She has a native question. Trying to do a native plant area through seeding. However, the native violets that were already there have had such a good year. The seeds are not germinating and or growing properly because they're crowded out. Is there a way to discourage the violets besides manually weeding and digging them out? What do you think?
Well, that's how I've always dealt with violets. And I just around to that we have a mulched area around our fire pit last night and had a little campfire. But yeah, man, when you have just a total ground cover of that, it's not real practical to go pull a large area. I always look at herbicides as kind of the last resort, but depending on what kind of natives you planted, you could get something that was selective for a broadleaf plant like a violet that would save native grasses, but it's probably going to kill any forbs that you planted. So, short of hand pulling or mechanical removal of those violets, I don't know, because I think other things are going to disturb your little seedlings too much.
Yeah.
I just found the Home Yard and Garden Pest article, so I'll post it in the chat box. And that was viburnum leaf beetles active in Northeast Illinois, and it was June 2018.
Okay, perfect.
I actually have a wonderful ground cover of violets in my backyard. I have rock mulch, and then of course, every horticulturist least favorite thing is rock mulch and fabric. So on top of that rock mulch, there's weeds growing. So I've selectively let the African violets, the violets and the dandelions take over because they're good for the bees in the early spring, and then I weed them out of the garden beds throughout the year. But it's not a horrible ground cover.
It's native. I mean,
it's native.
I think
suffocation, you could cover it up and suffocate it. But just weeding it out of my beds, I don't think it's that hard of a weed to weed. It's not like chameleon plant where you're not getting the roots.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think one way that I've had massive hand weeding projects like that of my own. It just always helps me to like divide off a little section, find the section I think is the best of the natives. And maybe you just focus on a 10-foot wide circle that you're going to weed for this week and just see what you can do over the summer. But that's been a way for me to just deal with massively weedy areas just in a little bit and accept the fact that I may not be able to weed it all, but at least I can get this area looking nice, or maybe it's the closest part to your house or most visible area.
Yeah, there is another article that was May 2020 that Michelle Wiesbrook put in the Home Garden newsletter. So I just put that in the chat box.
Nice.
Violets and landscape beds.
Yeah. That's
Okay,
good.
we have about 10 minutes left and there's a couple more questions in here. So if you have a question, get it in now if you want to get it answered today. But Betsy asked earlier, as a beginner, please recommend a few perennials to start with. What would be some easy perennials for a beginner gardener?
Well, my first question always is, what's the sun situation?
Under shade, yeah.
Yeah, full sun or shade, because that's really going to make a difference. There's a lot of tough perennials out there. And, I already mentioned, Carl Forrester. You've got your sedum spectabilis. You've got, fall blooming asters, black-eyed Susans. Then people always say, oh, but they're everywhere. Well, there's a reason that everywhere is they're pretty tough. They usually give you the show, and there's not a lot of maintenance. So, more common. Daylilies are pretty darn tough. I always joke, you can tell where the old farmhouse was, where the front door was, because there's usually a peony coming up on one side and a clump of daylilies on the other. They're tough. Some of the more common things, try it. I always encourage people, try something new every year. It might become your new favorite.
Good tips. Good. Okay, we've got, let me see, I think there was one more question. Linda asked if she's trying to get rid of masses of tawny daylily in her yard. But when I throw it in the compost pile, it just regrows. Any tips on how to kill the tubers or roots before putting in the compost pile?
The first thing that comes to my mind, put them in a black plastic bag and put the bag out in the sun.
That's what I was thinking too.
And let them desiccate, and then throw them in the compost pile. I would bury them deep, and I would make sure that your compost pile is being turned regularly so that you're getting those high temperatures. We just turned our pile on Saturday, and by Sunday we were already up to 145 degrees. So don't just throw them on top, try to get them in and then keep it turned to keep the heat going. Those are the only suggestions that I have.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say too. Very good. Okay, I think we are caught up on questions. If you have any, feel free to add them to the comment box while we're finishing up. But I think, Kelly, did you have a video to show today? I think, right?
Yeah, we can share the video. I did a video about spotted winged Drosophila, an invasive pest for soft-skinned fruits like raspberries and blackberries, just to give some advice to people and how to detect them in their backyard.
Hi, my name is Kelly Alsop, and I am a horticulture educator for University of Illinois Extension. Today I'm here at the Sustainable Student Farm on campus. And we are here to talk about a potential pest on fruits in your backyard. Spotted winged Drosophila. I know it sounds like a big name, but it is a fruit fly, an invasive species for here in Illinois. What's different about the spotted winged Drosophila and other fruit flies is that it has a serrated ovipositor, which means it can lay its eggs in unripe fruit. And by the time you go to harvest them, you already have fully formed larvae. Other fruit flies have to wait until the fruit is ripe in order to lay eggs in it. So most of the time, you've already harvested before that fruit fly comes in. One of the ways that you can detect spotted-winged Drosophila in your raspberries or your blackberries or whatever soft-skinned fruit you have is you can smash the fruits in your hand and you will find little white larvae that have already started growing to quite a large size within your ripened fruit. A second method to determine if you have spotted-winged Drosophila larvae within your fruits is to take a small sample of the fruit, submerge it in a bowl with salt water, and they will actually come to the surface of the water and you'll be able to detect it then. Another way to detect spotted-winged Drosophila before you actually have them laying eggs in the unripe fruit is construct your own trap like this one. What I've done is I've taken a little paint can and I've put holes in it. I've actually put red tape on it because the spotted-winged Drosophila are attracted to that color. On the inside, we have a yellow sticky trap, which when I peel, they'll stick to it. And I will also put apple cider vinegar in the bottom as a way to attract them to the plant. So I'm just going to place the trap in amongst the plant so that I will detect the adults of spotted-winged Drosophila. Once the adult spotted-winged Drosophila are seen in the trap, it is time to take action. One thing that organic fruit growers do is they use an exclusion netting over the plants so the spotted-winged Drosophila do not have access to the unripe fruits.
Okay, well, thanks for putting that together, Kelly. That was really good.
It was a long 3 minutes.
Yeah. Okay, well, I think we got through all the questions that came in today. So any final thoughts, everybody, before we wrap up today?
Martha, what's blooming in your garden right now?
Oh my, lots of stuff. My lupins are just on their way out. Lilies, the martigons just are finishing up. What I'm looking forward to next are my oriental lilies as they pop with the fragrance. I've got Stachy's Humelo is in full gorgeous bloom right now. All sorts of stuff. But you know, I'd also, in my garden, I use so much foliage color that the visual interest is not just the flower color. So I'm thinking I'm going to have to go walk around and notice what's in bloom.
So can you tell us a little bit about your project you've been working on and how we can see you and your beautiful plants in the future?
I'm doing a video series on our website, which is University of Illinois, Rock Island County. And I call it Martha's Shed Talks. And for my garden, the first one was on fritillary bulbs. I'm trying to highlight more of the unusual. Last week, it was alliums, from the giant onions to the big Schubertii to Allium millennium. And right now I'm working on martagon lilies, which beautiful plants, partial shade. They're sometimes called the Turk cap lily. They're the ones with the flowers that go down and the leaves are whirled around their stems. So that's what I'm working on now. And after today, I might do something on gold foliage.
I think that's a wonderful idea. If you do something on purple foliage, Ryan would be your biggest fan.
Mhm.
I'd have to ask you for some pictures. With purple foliage, to me, sometimes if it's not contrasted properly in the landscape, it's like a hole. It's like a visual dark spot. But if you work it correctly, like up against my Sun King Aurelia, I have a Concord grape barberry, and that deep purple up against that yellow is striking.
Yeah, my smoke
We have to work together on that.
purple. Cool. Well, we appreciate you being on with us today, Martha, and sharing your expertise. I hope everybody goes and checks out your videos. You have, I wouldn't even call it a shed. You have an awesome garden building.
It's called the garage mahal.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So we want to thank everybody for hopping on today. We are back to doing this show every 2 weeks. So be sure to keep an eye on our Facebook page where we'll always post when the next date is and what the topic is. And we appreciate everybody being on today. Great questions, great conversation, and we will see you next time. Happy gardening. Get out there and enjoy this beautiful weather.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.